Hello, my name is Zakaria Kone, and I'll be presenting today alongside our friend Jessica and Amar. And the video we are analyzing today is global economy in transition. And this is the table of content we put together to illustrate the content of what we'll be talking about. As I said, this video is about global economy in transition, and it focuses on the risks related to global economy and the action needed to tackle those risks. The future economy, prosperity, and sustainable environment are some of the discussed challenges. The presented risks are climate change, inequality, and changing demographics, while on the other hand, robotization and innovation are perceived as opportunity to overcome this risk. In this video, we have 5 different panelists. First one is Christine Lagarde, who is a lawyer, politician, and also the first woman to serve as France finance minister between 2007 and 2011. Serving as the president of the European Central Bank since November 2019. Prior to this appointment, she served as the chair and managing director for the IMF between July 2011 and November 2019. She was also the first woman to become finance minister in the G8 countries. Despite such an impressive career, Ms. Lagarde faced a lot of criticism, especially regarding the comments she made about the Greek debt crisis, and also found guilty of negligence for a role in Bernard Tapie's scandal. Kristina Yegova is a Bulgarian economist who is currently the managing director for the IMF. She worked as chief executive for the World Bank between January 2017 and October 2019. She also served as the acting president for the World Bank Group from February to April 2019. She is known for having played a leading role in securing the largest funding in the history of the World Bank, and her work in gender equality shouldn't go unnoticed. Lesep Kayagango is a South African economist and a central banker. He is a governor of South African Reserve Bank and was appointed to that position in October 2014. He was a deputy governor for the South African Reserve Bank between 2011 and 2014. His strict approach in aligning fiscal and monetary policies, as well as advocating for the structural reform and fight against the constitution change to remove Reserve Bank inflation, have boosted his public figure status. Arihiko Kuroda is the current governor of the Bank of Japan. He was formerly the president of the Asian Development Bank from February 2005 to March 2013. He is known for his hard and continuous deflation fight in Japan, as well as his policies and method being regarded as the world's most severe and unorthodox monetary policies. Mariana Mazzucato is an economist and professor at UCL. She's also an author, and also the latest book is called The Value of Everything, Making a Taking in a Global Economy. She's advising policymakers around the globe about innovation, and she has also undertaken a lot of several research that focuses on the relationship between financial markets, innovation, and economic growth. The panelists have identified 3 different key risks for the global economy, which are climate change and changing demographic. Panelist Jogova has spoken about the climate change, and that it might cause unmeasurable cost of suffering. She warns that if the global temperature rises by 2.5 degrees, it will cause 15% loss in the global GDP. And if it increases by 3 degrees, the loss will be 25%. She also stated that by committing to climate change through investment in adaptation, resilient agriculture, as well as coral reef and coastal area protection, we'll be able to reduce this risk. Panelist Kuroda stated that aging culture put a downward pressure on the economic growth, challenging fiscal balance activities by increasing social security expenditure while decreasing tax revenue and social security premiums. An aging culture can also lead to the destabilization of the financial system if economic growth declines along with national rate interest. He said that this issue can be eliminated by encouraging female participation in labor by using technology to solve the unavailability of labor force. Panelist Kayayango discussed young culture in Africa. The issue of the youth unemployment, which can be fought by updating the educational system to cater technological advancement and by helping those with obsolete skills to transition smoothly to a new position. And now my colleague, RP, will take on from here.
The panelists have discussed issues that are arising in the market economies. Firstly, panelist Mazzucato discussed how innovation leads to growth in the long term, but the way this growth is distributed can lead to inequalities, which can be offset when public and private bodies collaborate in innovation system investments, encourage experimentation through patient finance, and by returning profit to the economies. Then panelist Jova spoke about extreme poverty that still exists in Africa, even though global poverty has fallen to 10%, and stated that digitalization can be used against poverty, and that internet can be used to link small producers to markets and create entrepreneurs. Thirdly, panelist Mazzucato spoke about extreme form of finalization in terms of share buybacks and emphasized the need to maximize stakeholder value, not shareholder value, and focus on reinvesting profits in the economy to ensure new job opportunities. Finally, panelist Lagarde raised the issue of fragmentation in trade, trust, and technologies, and the panelists used the following solutions: restoring trust in multinationalism, the dealing with changes to global levels, ensuring fair transactions, to succeed in international cooperation and have more women in corridors of power, along with global framework for international taxation and free flow of secure data across borders. Moving to panel discussion, we collectively agree with the following statements. Companies need to innovate and lower their material content and resource used by repurposing, recycling, and reusing the resources at their disposal, which panelist Mazzucato introduced. We also disagree with the profit needs to be reinvested into economy and prioritizing stakeholder value over stakeholder own and organizing production. Furthermore, we agree with the panelists that the inclusion of women in the workforce is important. We also agree with Lagarde and Jova's statement that poorest countries are affected by climate change and the importance of coral reef and coastal area protection and building resilient cities. Finally, we agree with panelist Kogado's statement that required skills for future jobs are more technologically driven than current jobs. But we disagree with the following statements. Starting with panelist Jova, energy privatization remarks, and she applied CSR washing by saying that business leaders are stepping up for climate change and reputation when they in fact contribute to greenhouse gas emission. We also disagree with panelist Kogado's statement that transitioning workers to green industry is achievable by policies and interventions. He applied CSR washing when he said Africa has a young population and non-unemployed young people. We disagree with panelist Mazzucato that high risk intensive capital is a key requirement for innovation system success, because we learned from Lehman Brothers encouraging high risk behaviors can lead to disasters. Finally, we disagree with panelist Jova that we should place people like Lagarde in high corridors of power because of her role in vulnerability scandal. Furthermore, we believe that the panelists fail to address global inequality and how emerging economic resources are utilized to benefit the global north and the need to reduce work time. Now further, Amar will continue with the presentation.
Now, we are moving towards the critique of some of the narratives and some of the things said by the panelists. So first two points I will discuss, which are based on unethical capitalism basically. The first point is implement global carbon taxes worldwide, which is basically not fair for the countries that didn't contribute much to the increase of carbon levels. The affluent, highly advanced countries of the world have a far greater responsibility for combating climate change than the poorer and underdeveloped countries of the world, mainly Africa and Asia, because they underwent industrial development at a much earlier time and thus have been emitting high amounts of carbon in the atmosphere for a much longer and continuing to do so to maintain and operate their massive production facilities. Despite this ethical responsibility, developed countries and their corporations are trying their best to lessen the efforts needed to reduce their emissions and to help the underdeveloped countries to mitigate and adapt to climate change possible risk. When Paris Agreement was signed, there came the pledge of $100 billion a year in climate funding by 2020 to fund measures promoting reduction of emission of gases, contributing towards raising global temperature and adaptation strategies for possible climate change risk. Though the money has been slow to roll out actually. The seriousness of combating climate change can be alluded from the fact that US is already in line to withdraw from Paris Agreement and their president Donald Trump says it's a hoax.
Fake news, I'm telling you folks, they want us to stop using hairspray because it harms the environment. It's all fake news.
And the Trump administration has followed the pro-fossil fuels agenda, which somehow depicts the seriousness towards combating climate change. Instead of implementing global carbon taxes on the poor countries, they should be implementing ethically strict measures on developed countries who are mainly responsible for increase of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which eventually leads to global warming. Another point which fits to unethical capitalism, which is said by Kristalina Georgieva, that banks will be investing more in green projects in developing countries. While these financial investments will be mostly in the form of loans, while poor countries didn't contribute much to climate change, and they are the ones that will be suffering most of it as they have to pay back with interest. On the other hand, we have also seen that developed countries' banks are also financing fossil fuel projects as well, which contradicts somehow their commitments towards green environment projects. According to the data released by Greenpeace UK, major UK banks are violating climate change commitments under Paris Agreement by collectively supporting and financing worldwide coal industry with approximately £25 billion. According to Rosie Rogers, head of Greenpeace UK Climate Emergency Campaign, the coal industry should be on the deathbed, but it is being kept alive only by desperate and dirty funding from banks such as Barclays and HSBC. Since the 2015 Paris Agreement was signed, HSBC has provided £8.4 billion in financial support to companies building new coal plants. Standard Chartered and Barclays have given £7.4 and £7 billion respectively, while the state-owned Royal Bank of Scotland has given £1.8 billion. And also, the 6 largest Wall Street banks in the United States committed more than $700 billion towards fossil fuel financing from 2016 to 2018. When Kristalina Georgieva and Christine Lagarde said they are taking radical measures to combat climate change and saying think about your grandchildren when you talk about climate change, these all funding violations from banks towards fossil fuel projects and coal projects are happening under their watch as the key representatives of IMF and European Central Bank who keeps look on the policy for global banks, and this somehow contradicts with what the things they are saying and with their intentions. The reality is that behind every coal mine and oil and gas pipeline there is a bank providing the financial lifeline. Now I will be talking on these points. These points are basically set by the panelists, and they are the case for they are supporting basically financialization, and they come under this category. So the first point is companies are using, Kristalina Georgieva said that companies are using climate change for profitability. The purpose to create carbon markets instead of simply using some sort of government's regulatory approach or a fixed carbon price is basically due to the constant agenda pursued by industry and other economic groups, both of which had reasons and enticements to force governments to embrace marketization. Their campaigning efforts are aided by the fact that this tactic fit the current neoliberal ideology which fosters increased privatization and financialization of public goods. For economic traders, carbon markets are a new way to basically create a new business products from which they hope to make high profits, as such markets are being accepted now nationally and as well as abroad. After we saw the real estate collapse of 2008 that initiated the Great Recession, the financiers basically recognized that they need to outspread the reach of the capitalist system to generate a new market for their profits-driven agenda, and carbon popped up at the right time. So as it is the hot topic of debate worldwide, and everybody nowadays is talking about that. Carbon markets have given license to big multinational banks and opportunities, which are among the largest buyer of carbon credits, a new way to earn huge commissions and fees, and a new product to pack into guarantees and derivatives. Now, as number of offset projects increases in carbon security, the drowsier it becomes. Further, the risk is higher in this type of securities in comparison to other type of securities like the mortgage-based securities that were mainly accounted for 2008 crash, because the goods that they are bundling together are entirely imaginary. The evidence and the expertise to provide the required proof of emissions reductions and avoided emissions that is the basis of offset credits simply does not exist, which, when coupled with an absence of effective government regulations, makes it convenient for large-scale corporations to keep building up carbon credits while doing almost negligible to actually lessen the amount of emissions. This will certainly lead to a carbon bubble that will burst the same as other financial markets have in the past, but it could have far serious implications, my friends, due to its fictional underpinnings. Companies are now also employing the same strategy with renewable energy and going towards CSR washing by saying we will be shifting to renewable energy and seeking loans from the government banks to finance their long-term plans and maximize their profits by avoiding carbon taxes in the future. The companies who already shifted or some of their production on renewables are basically pushing towards carbon taxation so that reap the profits and capture the market by creating strong competition for future companies. So on the second point I will discuss, Mr. Kagan Yako said that we should invest in educational system now to provide workforce for next 20 years. It sounds a little bit absurd to me, because he said that we should invest in education now to cater the needs of changing economy so that graduates in the future can engage in the economic system driven by technological advancement. But he said, give me money, so in 20 years I will give you the workforce for future works. But he forgets that technologies are evolving so rapidly that by the time that graduates finish learning, their knowledge might become obsolete and outdated. How he can predict the future? As future value is unpredictable, and in order to predict, you need to back it up by experiments. Now on the third point, patient finance, Miss Mariana Mazzucato said that we should be applying the strategy of patient finance, and we should be giving money to the companies and just let them do research. Just in the case of Elon Musk, for example, these projects are basically mostly based on space exploration, but it is not an impeding issue for citizens in comparison with poverty and possible climate changes. On the last point, I will say that Ms. Kristalina Georgieva said that weapon of the choice in the war against poverty will be digital. But how is giving poor people technology going to end poverty? Because first, latest technology is not cheap, and secondly, you need to have experienced people to operate these sophisticated technologies to get most of the benefits which the new technology says it. The reality is basically companies of developed countries want to reproduce the China experience in Africa and other Asian countries by exploiting cheap labor, avoiding strict laws and taxes in their own countries, and exploiting loopholes in political systems of underdeveloped countries. Now my colleague Jessica will continue with this presentation.
Lagarde and Corrado are viewing automation as a blessing in replacing human labor, while mocking the fact that robots cannot join unions and consider humans replaceable objects. There was lack of consideration that elders do not adapt easily to technological equipment, and robotization was pushed forward to eliminate the unavailability of labor forces so that productivity and GDP levels remain high. Also, panelist Santiago was attacking trade unions and saying that they have the wrong attitude and want to protect jobs instead of people. This statement tries to diminish modes of resistance in power organization structures. He said that a coal industry worker can transition to renewable sectors, but he did not explain how a 50-year-old who has over 25 years of experience in coal industry can move to a renewable energy post. And trade unions' contestation is in its place unless a clear plan is presented on how to transition coal workers and if coal workers would like to switch careers in the first place. Moreover, a modernist approach can be seen in dictating how poor countries should deal with climate changes, how trade unions should operate, and that poor countries should embrace privatization, which increases private decision-making that focuses on profits. This does not benefit citizens, as we learned from the privatization of trains in the UK, and high ticket costs that do not reflect the power of competitiveness in reducing prices. The panelists have ignored the issue of long working hours. As per Sanitarius, labor productivity has increased over 10 times with the use of machinery in the 20th century, but average working hours per week is 40. They have ignored the fact that capitalism reduces employees to fulfilling their work tasks when they sell their time to employers, which backs up Lavargue's saying about capitalistic systems that they quote-unquote reduce the producer to the smallest number of needs, to suppress his joys and his passions, and to condemn him to play the part of a machine. The panelists were focused on ensuring high GDP levels in increasing productivity through long working hours, and as per Sparrow, there is an uncontested belief that social health is measured through GDP levels. Also, the suggestion that green growth has ecology aligned with economy and that they can both benefit from it is incorrect. Even though productivity increases could lead to efficient energy and resource use, they also increase consumptions which reduce these energy savings. This is known as rebound effect. For example, increased productivity in electric cars will lead to their price reduction, and therefore more people will buy them. By that, more energy will be used to power these cars. Hence, the potential energy savings will be reduced, and so economic growth reduces energy efficiency levels. Although this concept has been presented back in 1980 in economic sciences, it is still ignored in most studies and policies, and it is assumed that greenhouse gas emissions can be reduced through efficiency improvements only. As per Sanatrius, measures like eco-taxes and resource use caps cannot restrain rebound effects on a global level, and the real method to limit increased consumption is by halting economic growth. The capitalistic approach in dealing with risks and viewing them as opportunities to create profits and how to extract more from population to increase productivity levels while ignoring studies that refuse the alignment of ecology with economy. In conclusion, it is the responsibility of developed countries to help developing ones in combating climate change because they caused it. Also, a global framework with clear outline must be developed on how to deal with climate change, with the cooperation and commitment of all countries in a just manner that leaves no winners and losers. We also need to widen the use of successful co-op structures, such as those implemented in John Lewis and Huawei, and move away from capitalism. There's a need for immediate government actions to eradicate inequalities and global cooperations to end extreme poverty. Finally, we need to consider rebound effects to achieve real sustainability targets and disassociate social health from economic growth. Thank you for listening.